Hey everybody, welcome back to the shanty. It's a beautiful sunny day. First thing you can notice, the camera angle is a little different. Why is it a little different? It's a little different because it's a beautiful sunny day. See that? That is going to shine in your eyes the whole time we talk. So I'm going to try to keep my big noggin right here and screen the sun out for you. The second thing you're going to notice is we're going to talk about Formula One racing. Why are we talking about Formula One racing? We're talking about Formula One racing because I am a Formula One racing fan. And whenever I can bring something I like into doing these shanties, I do that. Now, here's my disclaimer. We're going to talk about one particular Formula One racing team and that racing team's team principal. As we go along, you're going to hear me say team principal. Team principal, for those of you who don't know, think CEO. We're going to talk about the Red Bull Racing Team. Now, here's my disclaimer. I am not a fan of the Red Bull Racing Team. They're very successful and have been very successful over the last couple of decades. I am right now today a Mercedes fan. Next year I will be a Ferrari fan, which makes a lot more sense for a guy with the name Palazzolo to be a Ferrari fan. I'm going to be a Ferrari fan next year because Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari, and I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, so that's why I'm going to be a Ferrari fan. So with that disclaimer out of the way, again, why are we talking about the principal of an F1 racing team? These are just tiny little, out of the way things, right? Well, no, they're not. The Red Bull Racing Team, Red Bull itself is the drink company. They own the Red Bull Racing Team. The Red Bull Drink Company has 17,848 employees in 177 countries, according to their website. Now, I wasn't able to find out how many people actually work for Red Bull Racing, but you can bet it's 1,000 plus. Depending on what website you look at, the number's between 800 and 1,200-ish. Mercedes has over 1,000 employees. Red Bull is going to be roughly the size of the Mercedes. Again, it's the racing team, not Mercedes, the car company. They have way more than 1,000 people, but you can bet it's about 1,000 people. So this is a big organization. We're talking about the CEO of a major business. So, again, who cares about Christian Horner and his travails on the Red Bull Racing Team? Well, F1 is big around the world. I mean, this is a big sport. This story has made it way beyond the sports pages. It's on front pages in places like the UK and in Europe and in Australia and in Asia. It's also way on the front page because Horner's famous for two other things. Number one, the Netflix series Drive to Survive. He's kind of a feature principal player in that. He's been an outspoken sort of interview on Drive to Survive. And number two, he's married to a woman named Jerry Halliwell. For those of you that don't know, Jerry Halliwell is a former Spice Girl. Now, you're going to be surprised to learn that I do not know much about the Spice Girls, so I don't know which Spice Girl she was. I mean, for all I know, she was Pumpkin Spice. But she is a former Spice Girl, so that has taken the story even beyond the sports pages into the kind of the tabloid news, right? This is kind of salacious stuff. Well, why is it salacious stuff? Because Mr. Horner was accused of inappropriate and controlling behavior, quote unquote. On February 5th, Red Bull Racing's parent company, Red Bull GmbH, which is, I think, an Austrian company, again, it's the energy drink company, confirmed that Mr. Horner was under investigation following an accusation by an employee of the team of, quote, inappropriate and controlling behavior, end quote. Now, at the time, the company said, quote, we take these matters extremely seriously and the investigation will be completed as soon as practically possible, period, end quote. Okay, that first thing we want to talk about. So we've got a complaint. Let's use this as an object lesson. We've got a complaint from an employee against the CEO of the company that was filed, I assume, with HR or through their ethics line or something like that. What does a company do? They investigate. Okay, so they have said we take these matters extremely seriously and we're going to investigate. So that's checkbox number one of doing things right by Red Bull. Let's conduct an investigation. We don't ignore it. because it's the CEO. We don't brush it aside or try to sweep it under the rug. We investigate. So Red Bull went out and hired a barrister, an independent barrister, they said. Okay, for those of you that don't know, a barrister is one kind of an English lawyer. There's two kinds of English lawyers. There's barristers and solicitors. Barristers go to court, solicitors don't. So if I was in England, I would be a solicitor. If my friends Ed Bardelli or Amanda Fielder, who you've seen on this podcast, were in England, they would be barristers. They go to court. I don't go to court. So they hired a barrister to conduct an investigation. That, to me, is checkbox number 2 of doing things right. We're investigating the CEO of the company. You guys, a lot of you are HR people. Want to investigate your boss? See how well that works out? No. It's difficult for you. But the real reason is Red Bull knows this is going to be a high-profile investigation. It's got to be unbiased. It's got to be done right. And it's got to be done quickly. And the best way to ensure you're doing that is if you get a outside third party involved. And if you're going to get an outside third party involved, there's a lot of good reasons for using a lawyer, one of which might be the privilege. Whether these investigations are privileged or not is an interesting question. And we're not going to dig into that question because it's complicated when the privilege applies and when it doesn't. But anyway, so they hired a third-party barrister to do it. Check. All right. So what's the third thing you have to do? The third thing you have to do is you got to do it now. We cannot delay. We got to do it now. So on February 9th, Mr. Horner was questioned by the barrister for 8 full hours in a meeting. All right. The article I read said in a secret London location, like it's some, nefarious thing. He got interviewed by the barrister. And then on the 28th of February, Red Bull GmbH announced, quote, the independent investigation into the allegations made against Mr. Horner is complete, and Red Bull can confirm that the grievance has been dismissed, end quote. So this apparently clears Horner to return to his work, and he was, in fact, at the race this weekend. According to Sky Sports, the barrister's report was more than 100 pages long, all right? So let's talk about prompt. Is that prompt? The CEO of Ford didn't think it was prompt. They weren't moving fast enough. But I think that's pretty prompt. I think that's checkbox number 3 on what Red Bull is doing correctly here. Checkbox number 3, they got this done in just a bit over 20 days. I mean, assuming the report came in somewhere right around February 5th, and they're done on the 28th, and it's a 100-page report, that means this barrister had a lot of material to go through, a lot of people to interview. They did a lot of stuff. I think that's pretty quick. And not to point fingers or anything like that, but that's a lot quicker than the 6 to 9 months it takes, apparently, to investigate the football coach at a major university in the state of Michigan. 25 days is way better than 6 to 9 months. So I think that's pretty good. That gets us to number 3. So what is your obligation once the investigation is done? Well, you have to take, in the United States, I know this is in England, but let's assume we're in Grand Rapids, not Milton Keys. Once the investigation is done, if you determine that there's something wrong, that harassment has taken place, you have to take prompt, appropriate remedial action. If you determine no harassment has taken place, you close the investigation. So they closed the investigation, and Mr. Horner kept his job, at least for now. That means no legal violation and no policy violation, at least to me. That's what that means. No legal violation and no policy violation. And remember, you can have the latter without the former. In September of 2022, I did a shanty called Consequences. Let's try that again. In September of 2022, I did a shanty called Consensual with Consequences, breaking company policies without breaking the law. So in a situation like this where you have the CEO, you could have inappropriate behavior that is a violation of your policy without actually having a violation of sexual harassment laws. Now, I don't know what the laws are in England, but that's what you can do here in the United States, in Michigan. All right. So that should be the end of it, right? We're done. Except this is a really high-profile thing. As a matter of fact, Jos Verstappen, who is the father of Red Bull's star driver, who has won 3 drivers' championships in a row, has publicly called on Horner to quit. I can't read you the whole article because it's locked, but I can read you the headline from the Telegram. Or the Telegraph, which says Jos Verstappen calls for Christian Horner to quit Red Bull. Quote, he is playing the victim, end quote. We don't know what the report says, right? But we do know that. So here's what happened next. On February 29, hundreds of people, including the FIA president, FIA is the governing body for F1, the CEO of Formula One, all 9 other team principals, not in Red Bull, Mercedes, Haas, McLaren, so on, as well as hundreds of people in the media got an anonymous email. The anonymous email was sent from 3 different servers, and the anonymous email contained between 75 and 79, depending on what article you read, folders, all of which was titled Evidence After Christian Horner Investigation, or something like that. And they contained screenshots of what purportedly WhatsApp, I assume that's some social media thing that I don't know about, WhatsApp conversations between Mr. Horner and the complaining party of a sexual nature. At least that's what's being reported. Now, Horner denies this. All right. So that raises the final question we're going to talk about. The final question we're going to talk about is, what do we do with all these anonymous emails? And the answer to that is a good lawyer answer. It depends. What we don't know yet is if the barrister had access to all of these WhatsApp conversations during their investigation. Now, the barrister might have. Don't forget, we've got a 100-page report that took 20-some days to compile. So it's entirely possible the barrister had all of the barrister, I don't know if it's a she or a he, the barrister talked to the complaining party. The barrister, if the complaining party actually had those conversations with Horner, presumably the complaining party spoke about them or turned them over to Horner or had copies of them or something, not turned them over to Horner, turned them over to the barrister. So the barrister had them. So if Red Bull had those documents, and if the documents were already considered, then Red Bull just should make an announcement that says, yeah, we know about these things, and they were already considered as part of the report, and the report's done. Now, the complaining party here, by the way, according to Red Bull, does have an opportunity to appeal this. I don't know how that works. I assume it's an internal process, but I don't know how it works. But what if the barrister didn't have all these WhatsApp things? Do we reopen the investigation? And the answer is yes, we do. Because we have to consider all the evidence. And the fact that the evidence was received anonymously doesn't matter. That can go to the weight of the evidence. Like, maybe you're going to look at these things and they're going to be clearly fakes, and the barrister says this is nonsense and we're not taking this into consideration. But you can't ignore evidence. Just because a complaint is anonymous doesn't mean you don't have to investigate it. You do. And just because you receive evidence anonymously doesn't mean you don't have to consider it. You do. So if the barrister didn't have access to all this stuff for whatever reason, you should reopen this investigation. Take this into consideration, reissue your conclusions, and then be done with it. Now, you would think that would be the end of it, and it would, but there's all kinds of calls out there. And you could take that. Remember, I don't like Red Bull, but you can take this for what it's worth. Toto Wolff, who's a team principal in Mercedes, calling for transparency and to release the report. That's not going to happen. Zach Brown calling for transparency and saying the report should be released to the FIA and F1. Now, that might happen because the FIA and the F1 have a clear interest here if this affects the sport. And then you've got Ford, the president of Ford. Now, I'll give you his quote from a letter he wrote to Red Bull. We are likewise frustrated by the lack of full transparency surrounding this matter with us, your corporate partners, and look forward to receiving a complete accounting of all findings. I think Ford, as a future partner of Red Bull, probably can make a good argument that they're entitled to know the details, not just the conclusion. But the investigation report's not going to be released to the public or to the media. I mean, come on. You're not going to do that. Anyway, that's what's going on in F1. And the race, by the way, this weekend, it was a little boring. Guess who won? Red Bull. By a lot. Again, Max Verstappen. See you guys next time.